we have come to the end of an era with the Sony Spider-Man universe films, or in this case, the Spider-Man less universe, as people have been calling it. And honestly, it's not over. They're still making Spider-Man movies, and maybe down the line they'll make some other villain films, but right now they've stopped. Hopefully for some people this is the end of this types of films, but I just wanted to make it clear, they never said they were officially done. They're just not looking at these projects for right now. But overall, that's probably a good thing. Personally, I haven't hated these films as much as I know a lot of people seem to. Yes, there's definitely been some stinkers, and yes, they've definitely had a lot of problems. But overall, I have had a good time. I've had a decent time, most of them. Some I really liked, others, admittedly, I really did hate. But I never really felt that I hated them or disliked them the reason a lot of people do. Because yes, Spider-Man is my favorite character, my favorite comic book character, my favorite hero. But I think that I also am able to see things in these movies, see things in the films, the scripts, the characters, in a way that other people aren't. You know, maybe they're the toxic fandom. Maybe they're the diehards that it always has to be this specific way. I'm open to some things changing, as long as you maintain the spirit of the characters, you maintain some semblance of the characters in a little way, and you don't just focus on one specific iteration. Now, granted, I have iterations of these characters that I will always remember, and they are mine. They're the ones I always think of. Surprise, surprise, primarily from the 90s cartoon. And that's where a lot of how I think of these characters comes from. But all that to say, I haven't hated or loved these movies. I've fallen in the middle for the most part. But I figured, Craven's out now. I just got to see it. So let's go ahead and rank these films. So I guess we'll say, let's go ahead and rank the Sony non-Spider-Man universe films. Coming in at the bottom of the list at number 6, we have Madam Web. And yes, this is the one film where I was like, okay, yeah, this is bad. I really don't like this movie. There's so many cringeworthy moments. There's so many things about it that I'm like, this is just not right. I could have handled a younger Madam Web, because as I will say again, I know it's an origin story and you can alter things a little bit, but there's just so many problems with this movie that I can't justify most of them. My biggest regret, I think, with this film is the Spider-Woman, because I'm pretty sure because of this film, we're not going to get any Spider-Women films or TV shows anytime soon. And honestly, that's a shame, because there's a lot of really good characters you could go with. You could go with Julie Carpenter. You could bring in Jessica Drew. You could do an Anya or a Maddie. I mean, I think that might have been interesting. Having a film with them being the main characters would have been interesting. And you could have done it, I think. I mean, heck, the very brief look we got at the costumes, I'm like, these are great. I really like them. I thought we were going to see more of them. They dropped the ball on there. I mean, even Madam Web or Cassandra Nova's costume, I thought looked really good. And I thought it could have worked. But they just really dropped the ball with this film. The other thing I will say that I did kind of like was how they showed her connection to the Web of Life, which is in the comics, that's a Spider-Man thing. That was pretty interesting. And her clairvoyance, how they showed that, I thought it worked. But there's just so much cringy dialogue in this film There's a lot of plot points you just don't need. This film is the one above all that has the most Spider-Man references without actually saying Spider-Man. I mean, you did not need Ben in there, aka Uncle Ben. You did not need Peter Parker's mother in Mary. You didn't need her there. You could have changed the names if you really wanted to do a story like that. You didn't need to include them at all. Like I said, if you really wanted to do something, make it a totally different character. You don't need to drag in, oh hey, that's gonna be Peter Parker. See, there's his mother who's gonna die, and there's his uncle and all this. And actually, I just realized they show all the people in Peter's life that basically dies. Yeah. So, I mean, that for me was the biggest problem I had with it. I'm like, oh God, just come on. We don't need this. And then when they do the whole, once you see your great responsibility, you'll have all this great power. It's like, oh God. That was the moment in the theater where I was like, ugh. And I basically never do that in films. But I was just like, this is just so bad. You forced that line. That's the first time I've said, oh, well, you clearly forced that. And then you have, I mean, you have the villain, Ezekiel. Yeah, he's a okay character in the comics. I mean, he's not one of my favorites, but I know they did a lot of good stuff with him, a lot of interesting things with him, and they just totally butchered him here. I mean, I did not care. Did not care about the villain. I found him to be uninterested. And I mean, honestly, I don't think he was very well performed either. It didn't make any sense. I mean, okay, you could have said, this is why people are going to hate Spider-Man, because they're going to be reminded of this costume. Sure. But you needed to do more with him. Oh, I foresee that I'm going to be killed by these Spider-Women, so I got to kill him first. It was like so many things in this movie, especially with the performances. These actors and actresses, most of them I know are great, and they can be really good. But it seemed like they phoned in a lot of it. I mean, I'm just like, okay, whatever. And the movie's boring. A superhero movie is not supposed to be boring. I mean, the final fight. Okay, there were some interesting things. I mean, her going off and being able to save everyone. That was interesting, and it worked. But it just felt bleh compared to other fights we've seen. It didn't have that big boss final feeling that so many superhero movies do. And yes, you might not always need that, but there needs to be something more to it. And this fight just did not have it. Overall, this movie was just bad on so many levels. And yeah, watching it a second time for this video, I'm like, that's bad, even for me. So coming in at number 6 at the bottom of this list is Madam Web. Coming in at number 5 for me is Morbius, which if you had told me that this was going to be above Madam Web originally, I would have thought you were crazy. But I went back, like I did for both these films, rewatched them, and I actually think it's a little bit better than people remember. Just a little bit. It's by no means great. But I feel like there's just hype around this movie. All the negative hype around this movie just has lent itself to people thinking, oh, I hated that movie. Oh, this is terrible, and this is terrible, and that's terrible. That's terrible. This movie just sucked. I mean, even I, when after seeing it, was like, yeah, I'm not buying that movie. And of all the Marvel films I've seen, I've basically bought every single one of them at some point. This is one that I'm like, nope, I'm not going to buy it. I'm not going to ask somebody else to get it for me. I don't need to own it. And I still feel that way. This one in Madam Web, I'm like, yeah, I don't need to own them. But I think there's some more redeeming qualities in Morbius than there are in Madam Web. Because like I said, Madam Web doesn't really have any. But here, I think they did a good job of visualizing Morbius's powers. You know, whether that was his sonic location, his flight, his bloodlust. You know, I think they did a really good job visualizing most of that stuff. The main issue I had with that was the whole, let's use bats and attack using bats. That, I was just like, where did that come from? I mean, I got that he had a connection with bats, especially after the scene where he steps into the tube that they're in and they don't hurt him and he just kind of becomes one with them. But I felt like him being able to summon them and then using them as weapons, that, I'm like, this doesn't really make sense. This doesn't work here. This isn't part of the character. And I'm usually, again, I'm open to interpretation, open to changes, but this one just, that one just didn't work for me. I liked his look. I thought as a vampire, he looked great. I really thought the first big fight he had, or I guess the first two fights, the one on the boat where he just turned into a vampire, and then the middle one, which is his first big fight with the main villain, which I can't remember the character's name, but it's Matt Smith. That was really good. The final one, though, I felt like it ended too soon. I felt like they could have gone further with it. They should have done more with it. And not use bats, among other things. That's like Spider-Man having a connection with spiders and using spiders as a weapon, which I feel like he has done that in the comics, now that I think about it. I know Lizard has. I know that's been a thing the Lizard's done. But anyway. And so, I mean, I feel like there were some good ideas in the film here. They had a good path they could have gone down. They just squandered it. They just didn't use it effectively. I didn't really feel a connection to Matt Smith's character. I feel like they needed to do more in developing him, why he turns. I mean, okay, he's sick. He gets picked on. Okay, yeah, there's a reason, but I felt like something else was needed. More Michael Morbius, he could have been developed more, I think. Their relationship just kind of felt like it came out of nowhere. It didn't really work for me, I think. It felt like there was a scene they filmed and then they cut. Now, as far as I know, that's not the case, but it just felt like we needed a little bit more development of these two characters. I mean, even his love interest, we needed more, I think, with her. More of a development there. You know, the duo cops, I hate them. They're my least favorite part of this movie. Even worse than Matt Smith's character, because I at least like Matt Smith. But these two, they're just a pain. They're annoying. I just don't like them. I don't get why they're there. I mean, I get why they have the cops there and what you're supposed to think about them. That ain't me. I don't like this pair. I could watch the movie much better without them and do something slightly different. You know, don't have cops be one of the main supporting characters. And then, of course, you have the whole post-credit scene with the Vulture coming in. And it ties into No Way Home and all that stuff. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, that's not canon. I pretend that scene doesn't even happen. Or if it does, it's Vulture from his world. You know, and maybe there's a Spider-Man somewhere. But honestly, I just pretend that scene doesn't happen. It's not canon. Not that any of that even matters anymore. Unless, of course, you want to get Michael Keaton back and put him back in the Spider-Man MCU universe. But, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things about about Morbius that really doesn't work. Dialogue is still one of the things. But I think compared to Madam Web, it's not as bad a film. Again, it's an origin for Morbius, who does become an anti-hero. So, yeah, a lot of things that they needed to change. It's in no way a great movie. It's in no way a good movie. But I just don't think it's as bad as everyone says. Still bad, though. So coming in at number 4. Wait a minute. Something feels off. Different. I mean, I feel like this isn't the same location I was just filming at. It feels like, I don't think this is what I had on either. It feels like some time's passed too. I don't know, but I'm having a time remembering what I was even doing. I think it was a ranking has something to do with not Spider-Man movies, but Sony Spidey-ish. Oh, okay. So yeah, coming in at number 4 is Kraven the Hunter. Yes, I liked this movie more than a lot of people. I've got 2 quick reviews up talking about it on my channel here. I know a lot of people would probably have put this movie at the bottom of their list, but I don't think this movie is terrible. Maybe it helped that I went in with very low expectations. Maybe it helped that the people in front of me were being noisy and rude and made me mad, that I just kind of enjoyed the movie more. I don't know. But that's a quick side note. Don't do that. That's just rude. So, also, from here on out, not that I held anything back in the last 2, but specifically for Kraven and Venom the Last Dance, when I talk about that one, there's going to be spoilers. Just a warning. So, Kraven for me, like I said, I don't think it's as bad as a lot of people have made it out to be. Yes, there's some very cringy dialogue moments. Yes, there's sometimes the action just is like, what's going on? It's kind of insane. There's some laughable moments. I don't think Calypso always works. Maybe they could have cut his late teens, early 20s down, that time down a little bit. Maybe there are points where we could have gotten more of the Kraven that people think they know from the comics, because like I say in another video, everyone seems to only think about Kraven's Last Hunt. Yes, great comic, but that's not the only version of Kraven. There's plenty more to the character than that. But overall, I just feel like this movie, people were expecting more from it. I mean, I was expecting to have a fun time, but I also was like, it's not going to be on the level of the Spider-Man films, and probably not on the level of the Venom films either. But I think it'll be decent. So that could have helped it also. But for me, this is an origin story. Just like Morbius was an origin story, this is an origin story for Kraven. And that's why he's not the Kraven yet that we know. I mean, I also don't like the fact that we only get one shot basically of his costume, and we know what's going to become his costume. And that's at the very end. I mean, it looks great, but I feel like that moment after talking to his brother, who's now the Chameleon, and his face looks great. I'm sorry, I thought that looked really good. It was very comic accurate. I love the fact that he has Chameleon abilities. And then having killed his father indirectly by having the animals do it, I feel like that is the part where we start to see the Kraven that we will see more and more later on in the comics. This is him becoming that character. So I don't expect to see all that in the very beginning. I want to see him grow, or maybe degenerate degenerate through the film. I thought Aaron Taylor Johnson was good in the role. I thought he was fine. It worked for me. I thought he did a good job. I mean, maybe there could have been a better Kraven. I'm sure there could have been, but he was good. I liked the interactions between him and his brother. I liked them showing how good at copying, or, you know, how good his brother was at just playing other people with his voice changes, hinting at, hey, if you don't know, he's going to become the chameleon, which we all knew that. But I did like his evolution also to becoming that chameleon character, because the chameleon is actually really deadly, and I liked seeing him become that. I actually think he had more of a path in this film than Kraven did. I liked the Rhino. I feel like he looked good. I mean, he wasn't great. There were plenty of things that's like, oh, well, eh. But it's a suit. I mean, it works just like the comics. He can't take the suit off in the comic books. At least originally he couldn't. And this is a similar thing. He can't take it off because it's part of him. And I love that he and the chameleon became like their animals, because then they tied it into Miles Warren. I loved that Easter egg. I'm like, oh man, we're not going to get it here, but it would have been great. I would have loved to have seen a Clone Saga type movie with him. I just think that could have been cool. I mentioned Calypso. It wasn't the Calypso that I was thinking of, because I'm familiar with the Dr. Kafka, with the nickname Calypso in the animated series, but I watched something about the comic book origin, so it was interesting. I feel like they needed to do more with her and Kraven, because it just kind of seemed like, well, okay, we're together. Okay, we're doing stuff together. That relationship, I feel like, needed to be built out a little bit more. We definitely got hints of who Calypso is going to become or could become. And people are like, oh, he gets bit and he gets the powers of a lion. Okay, fine. But he also takes a drug. It's a drug that gives him the abilities. That's what happens in the comics. I've seen it in many animated shows. And for me, the 90s, which is my favorite, he's a hunter before all this happens. He's Sergei Kravenov, just like he is in this movie, before everything happens. It's the serum that makes him go crazy. So for me, it's like that's part of the lore. Like, you're not thinking about that. I like that he's an environmentalist, I'll say, even if he goes crazy with it, you know, because he's going to protect the animals and all that, and then he's going after the bad guys. I like that to the character. I also will say the animals their CG was really bad. I mean, it didn't even look like they might have used real animals for certain parts. I liked the Easter egg when he fought the tiger, because that hints at his relationship he's had with tigers in the past. I know he's had pet tigers before. Like I said, they maybe could have cut down his early years a little bit, but I think it worked overall. The opening scene was good. I feel like they could have gone further with the action and maybe done a little bit more with the R rating, because I just feel like they didn't take it as far as they could have, you know, action-wise. The final fight with Rhino was fine. It was good, but I definitely wanted more. So overall, again, I don't think this movie's terrible. I think people are just wanting to find bad stuff, or they aren't looking at it from a, you know, okay, let's look at this from a character perspective. Let's look at the older stuff. Look at it as another version, because as another version of Kraven, I think it's okay. I think it's fine. It's not the best one, and it's definitely not the perfect one, but I don't think it's bad. So that's why, for me, and I'm going to get a lot of hate, I know, for this, Kraven the Hunter comes in at number 4. So now we get to the Venom films, which, is it really any surprise that these are at the top of the list? The only question is, what order am I going to put them in? Well, let's get started right now with which one comes in at number 3, which is Venom: The Last Dance. Now, let's start with the good stuff about this film. I think it maintains a lot of the really good stuff from the first two Venom films. With that being Venom and Eddie's relationship, the humor is there. The fight sequences, I think, are kicked up. I love seeing Eddie and Venom really working together more. You know, that opening, I'll call it the opening fight that they have against the poachers, or against the people that are, I guess it's dog fighting, actually. I think that's great. I love that scene. I personally love the look of Noel. I think he's creepy, he's scary, he looks like Noel. I hope that they do with him what they've talked about, bringing him into other franchises, that this is only the introduction, that he will appear in other things. Will he be in Secret Wars? Who knows? Will he be in Spider-Man? Who knows? They did give hints that he can travel the multiverse, it feels like, with the way the portals looked. I hope we get to see more. I thought he looked great. He was definitely really creepy. Andy Serkis was great as the character. I loved getting more of the symbiotes, getting to see more of the ones that either fans have been asking for or that we know exist, just to get a more variety of powers, a team up, you know, getting to see a lot more of the stuff that we came to see, you know, Venom and symbiotes and fighting, those types of fights. Like I said, I loved the relationship still between Eddie and Venom. I liked the Mrs. Chen scene. I thought that was really funny. It was really humorous, and it kind of moved the plot along in some ways. I liked how they maintained a sense of, well, stuff that made sense, kind of. Because I will give credit for this one to my wife, because she's the one that saw it, and I didn't really realize it till she pointed it out. The head doctor, her arm is injured. Her left arm, I think, is injured. So she doesn't use that through the whole film until she bonds with the symbiote. Then her arm's perfectly fine again. It still looks really good. I still think Venom looks cool in the suit. It was interesting seeing Venom as the symbiote jumping from animals to animals. You know, the horse and the fish. It was entertaining. And while at first, when I first saw this film, I wasn't a huge fan of it, primarily because I had my hopes up here based on what everyone had said. The second time I saw it, I definitely enjoyed it more. The ending really hit emotionally, with Venom sacrificing himself and just that bond that they share and it being broken, and what Eddie does at the end, going to New York and all that. Yeah, that got to me. But let's talk about the things that I didn't like about this film that make it lower on the list. I mentioned the symbiotes. They needed to have fewer of them, because I would have loved to actually get the names of them, like in the movie, instead of having to try and figure out as a fan which one was which, if some of them were even from the comics. And I also wish that they had done more. I mean, it seemed like half of them died right away. Half of them got eaten by those big dog symbiote creatures or whatever, which they were okay, but I kind of wish we had more of an actual villain. You know, kind of like how we had Riot in the first one, and then you had Carnage in the second one. Yes, it might have been cool to have Noel be the big bad for this film, but I also get, you didn't want him to be the big bad. You wanted him to move on to other films. But I still feel like it should have been something else. I mean, yeah, I guess they could have gone with another symbiote, like a bigger, badder symbiote or whatever. Or have Noel possess, you know, somebody. I don't know. That might have made it worse. I don't know. The other big thing I wasn't a huge fan of was, it seems like Eddie and Venom always have the same type of relationship in every single film. Now, I know I said early on that was good, but what I mean by this is, I hate you, Venom. Leave me. I don't like you either, Eddie. I'm going to leave you. Good. I don't like you. You got to behave yourself. Oh, I love you. I need you. I'm back, Eddie. I'm back. It's the same. It's like Brock says it's been a year. I mean, granted, in this one, Venom was attached to Eddie pretty much the entire time, except, of course, when he was jumping, like I said, from animal to animal. But I just feel like Eddie's annoyance with Venom never changed. I mean, it would evolve each story, be fine. Then it would start at the bottom again and go develop again. I wanted that to be a little bit more consistent. So that was another thing that I kind of was like, I'm not a huge fan of that. And while I love Mrs. Chen, glad she was in the movie, and I love that scene, that did feel forced too. It was just like, okay, what's Miss Chen doing here? Like, she's just randomly here because we want to have her here. And the family, while that had a lot of really funny lines and moments, like Venom making Eddie knock away the vegetable plate, they were annoying. I feel like you could have done something else with them. This film definitely had a lot of good ideas. I think it had a lot of interesting things. But I feel like maybe it didn't exactly execute all the plans and all the ideas really well. Like, they needed to do something more, I think, with the army guy, with that whole story. Needed to do a little bit more. The side characters weren't really developed like they used to be, so I did kind of miss the other characters, like his ex and her fiance. I mean, I get why they weren't there, but I kind of wish that maybe they had done something with them again. But all in all, this was not a bad film. It wasn't a bad Venom film. It's just my least favorite of the three. So for me, that's why Venom: The Last Dance comes in at number 3. Coming in at number 2 is Venom: Let There Be Carnage. Now, earlier, this movie was at number 1. But when I went back and rewatched these first 2 films before seeing The Last Dance, I just realized that it wasn't as good as I remembered. And I love this film. Right off the bat, I think Carnage looks great. I love the look of Carnage. I love how he behaves. I think Woody Harrelson as Cletus is fantastic. They have so much of the great humor from that first film. The Eddie and Cletus relationship, I like that. It's definitely neat to see it in a different way instead of having Eddie and Cletus meet in prison as cellmates or because they're both in prison. It's interesting to see it done this way. And I love the last fight. I'm just going to jump right to that. I love the last fight between Carnage and Venom. I think it's great. I love Carnage breaking out. It looks fantastic. Did this need to be R? No. It could have been interesting, maybe get to see more of the slice and dice with Carnage, but I don't think it had to be. I think it worked out fine. I didn't hate them killing Carnage and Cassidy as much as I know a lot of people did. I mean, I wish they had kept him because he's a great villain and they could have done more with him. But it's not like it's the thing that pulled this movie down at all for me. I mean, you almost come to expect it. So many superhero movies kill their villains in their films. Only a few ever survive. So it shouldn't really come as a shock to anyone. I love when Venom separates from Eddie, goes out on his own. That rave scene, I love it. I think it's the funniest part of the movie. So much so that I actually tried doing that as a costume this year. Didn't work as well as I hoped it would. But, I mean, that's how much I thought that scene was just so funny. And I just, overall, I like what they did with this film. I like the look of the film. Like I said, I love the look of Carnage. I love Venom. I love the humor that's there. I think Woody Harrelson does a great job as Cassidy. But the biggest problem that I realized about this film for me is I feel like they wanted to do too much and they didn't focus up where they needed to. like, I like the Shriek character. And yeah, she's important in the comics, and she's Carnage's love and all this. But I feel like you could have gone without her in this movie. I mean, maybe you mention her in the beginning. I mean, maybe you keep some of that stuff. But then you hint that she's alive in a post-credit scene or something. Because I really wanted them just to focus on the Cassidy and Brock relationship, or the Carnage and Venom relationship. You know, Venom's the father and Carnage is the son. You still could have kept the main storyline between Cassidy and Brock with, I want to try and tell my story. I don't like you because you ruined, you, according to me, you told my story wrong. Carnage doesn't like Venom. Maybe just because it's his father. I think that was the main reason. You could have kept all that. But I feel like you could have built on that more. That could have been the primary focus of the story. And I really feel like it needed another fight. It needed another earlier fight between Carnage and Venom. One where Venom loses. Because then that would have driven home, I feel, the final battle even more. It would have caused that final victory to really mean a whole lot more to Venom. I mean, you could have also compared how well Carnage and Cassidy are getting along, merged, and compare it to Venom and Eddie getting along, or not getting along in this case. You know, maybe they lose the fight and they split. Because they're like, we're not in sync. You ruined everything. You almost killed me. You know, you do that. I mean, I'm not saying writing a script is easy, because it's not. And they did some interesting things here. And overall, I like the movie. I just, after watching it again, I'm like, I feel like the Shriek story definitely held you back. And I really just wanted more Venom versus Carnage fight. I wanted something more with that. But it was enough. I really liked this movie. I thought it was really good. So there's enough about it that I would rather watch this movie over all the other ones on this list. Besides, of course, what comes in at number 1. Because Venom Let There Be Carnage comes in at number 2. So that means that coming in at number 1, obviously, is Venom. That original film. And I'm going to do this one a little bit differently. I'm going to start with the things I don't like about this film, because there's not that many. One nitpick that I have come to think about with this film is early on when Riot is jumping from person to person to person to get to the Life Foundation. That time jump does feel off. It feels like it's too long, but I mean, I guess having to jump from host to host and maybe not being able to stay in their body for too long, maybe that would take a long time. I guess actually that would work. But still, the time difference between when they land to when he gets there is one of my nitpicks that I have about this film. I also will agree with people that at times it is dark, in the sense that there's not enough light and it's hard to see characters at times. And we all know, or at least most of us know, that if it's dark, they're hiding bad CG. I will give them credit. The CG and Venom for this first film overall is great. And it just follows through with the other 3. I mean, the other 2. This is the first one. But it does get better later on. So I can kind of see where they were hiding some of the inconsistencies or parts of it that weren't great in the dark. But this film really does have a lot of great stuff that I love about it. Like I mentioned, I'm not going to go into detail again, but this is where the relationship between Eddie and Venom started. And I loved it. I mean, this movie had great humor. The plot was solid for me. It worked. You know, it was just a lot of fun. The action was good. The characters were entertaining. And I understood what drove all these characters. And I love the Easter eggs. I thought they all worked. And And this is coming from a person who originally, I will admit, I was one of the ones that wasn't sure if you could do a Venom movie without Spider-Man. Having now watched it many times, I'm like, why did I doubt this? Maybe it was just because I wanted to see Spider-Man in the black suit and then Venom, and I was just so used to that. But it works because they keep the essence of Venom, showing that he does have his own mind in here, which is interesting because recently they've added that type of stuff to the character, to the symbiote. And we see Eddie and we see him screw up his own life. You know, a lot of stuff that happens to Eddie in the comics, from stuff like, you know, primarily writing his own story or accusing people of things that they don't have the proof of, you know, even if it's wrong in the comics, but it's not wrong here. You know, being a newsman of some sort. That's accurate. It's just updated. And I think they did a good job in this movie of updating the character, updating the origin, and making it work for this universe and this telling of the character. If I didn't mention it, I love the fights. I think the fights between Venom and Riot are entertaining. When Eddie's first finding out that he's got a parasite, in Venom, just that first full action sequence I think is great. I love seeing Venom take control of his body, and I think that worked really well. And that hints, at least for me, that hints to the idea of how Spidey, the symbiote, would just take over him and just go do things, and Peter wouldn't be the wiser. Except, of course, here Eddie is. She-Venom, loved having that in there. You know, mentioned of New York and an incident in New York. Maybe it was a Sin Eater. I just feel that this film worked. They knew at the core of Venom's character, they knew who Eddie was. Disgruntled employee, down on his luck, filled with anger, gets bonded to a symbiote. Now here, yeah, they don't have the hatred part as much, but they get the essence of he wants to do good. He thinks he's actually doing good. That's what he really cares about. And like they say, unfortunately not in this one, but in the second one, they are the lethal protector. And he's becoming the lethal protector, and we see that growth in this film. And they did a good job, like I said, of incorporating all these different aspects. And it looked great. They did some things that I really had never thought about with the character before. Primarily with Eddie being able to talk to Venom, because I always just figured, oh, it's just, you know, merged together. It's one. But, you know, here they really do make it more of a symbiotic relationship. Which, that was the other thing I feel like that maybe was kind of mixed up or messed up. Because they always say we, because they're not fully symbiotic. And Carnage is supposed to say I, because they're so perfect together. They didn't really keep that part in the second film. But, I mean, this movie for me is just memorable. I forgot. I mean, I say it was memorable, and then I say I forgot. But this movie really is memorable, because there's so many great lines, so many great moments. And I had just forgotten how good of a movie it was, how fun it was, how much great humor there was, the characters, how well they worked, the story, and it had been a while, and I just forgot how much I loved this movie and how well it was executed. They definitely stepped it up in later films for certain aspects, but they never matched the exact same cohesiveness. I said that wrong. They had never had the same cohesion or symbiotic type of story that they had with this one. So for me, Venom, that first movie, is the best of these Sony non-Spider-Man-ish universe films. And there is my ranking of these, like I said, Spider-Man-ish less Sony films. I'm not one of the people that hates these films overall. I think they're fun, they're entertaining, they're different. But man, there really are some stinkers. When they mess up, they really messed up. And they're not perfect. Am I glad that people are saying the Sonyverse is over? I mean, I don't know. I kind of wish, like I said early on in some of these videos, I wish some of these characters would get another chance. And that's really my biggest gripe, is that some of the characters that were great in these films aren't going to get a second life, or don't appear to be getting a second life anytime soon. Who knows? But I do hope we get to see, you know, the Spider Women again at some point, even if they're different actresses. I hope we get to see Craven again. I hope we get to see Chameleon and Rhino, and sure, let's see Morbius again in some way. Let's see Madam Web. We have to see Venom and Carnage again. Really want to see them again. And Shriek, maybe if you truly do Maximum Carnage, then yeah. But all that to say, basically what I've said through this entire ranking, overall I've had fun with these films. They're not great, but some of them can be really fun and entertaining when you just take a step back, just relax, and don't let your idea of who these characters are get too much in your head. Just remember, these are different versions of those characters. If you don't like the films, then you don't like them. That's your opinion, and you're allowed to have it. I just like these characters overall. I like having them in media. I like getting to see them on the big screen and in live action. I think that's really all it is for me. But as you saw in this video, when they're bad, I'll call them out. When they are truly bad, in my opinion, I'll call them out. But let me know, what do you think? The comments, I'm already expecting to be interesting. Very interesting with this video. How would you rank these films? Let me know down in the comments which ones are your favorite, which ones are your least favorite. Whatever the case, let me know down in the comments. But be kind. We're all friends here. Don't forget to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button. We got to 75. I got to 75 subscribers this year, and that's good. I would have loved to get to 100, but 75 works. I don't think we're going to get to 100 by the end of the year, but that's another goal. Anyway, remember, read what you love, enjoy what you love, and let's all work for a better fandom. I'll see you next time.